Welcome and thank you for tuning in. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis. Approaching midlife for a lot of people seems to bring a lot of uncertainty. After all, we start reflecting on our lives and realize, well, all the decisions we've made have led us to the point that we are where we are right now. Do we find that longing, that midlife crisis that might compel and push us over the edge to the point where we finally realize that reaching beyond that horizon rather than trying to simply trudge forward toward it would have been a lot more inspiring to bring us the kind of gifts and wishes that we wanted to see fulfilled? On the program today, we're going to be talking about a book called When Did You Die? It's 8 steps to stop dying every day and start waking up. Well, it's about time that we simply did that. On the program today, she's known as a rebel, renegade, and resurrected 1,000 times. Her name is Temple Hayes, and she is known as a prophet and a mystic for our time. I'd like to welcome her to the program. Temple, how are you doing today?
Oh, thank you, Daniel. Thank you for having me on the show.
You bet.
I really appreciate it.
Very, very exciting for you. Tell us when this all started, because this goes way back for you, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. It's very interesting, when you're a motivational speaker or a spiritual teacher or whatever. We heard many years ago, I'm sure you attended those kind of classes too. You got to find a niche. You got to find, something that you're willing to stand up and stand for. And much to my surprise, over the years, I truly became a life advocate. Of energy and vibrancy and, just really knowing how profound life is a gift. And much to a surprise of someone as a small girl who wondered, why in the world am I even here, for many years, and then going through the throes of self-punishment called alcoholism, to start waking up and then realizing that I had much to offer from my life experiences.
Now, the interesting thing, too, is that I'm sure you've had times during your life, and people go through this, where they feel that what they are and who they are just really has not a whole lot of value to contribute to other people. And that kind of felt that way for you at times, didn't it?
Yeah, I think that, especially those of us that weren't recognized, when we were children, because our first few years, we see the mirrors of what people reflect back to us. And for me, I was always the person that asked the questions, always wanted to know why we went to the church we did, why we had separation in communities like the black and whites and different things like we did. And I never took things just because somebody had said, this is the way we do it. And I felt early on just so rejected by the uniqueness, of how I was showing up in the world kind of innately and naturally. And so I think that then in those teenage years, I started rejecting myself. I remember my classmates saying, "You're so deep, Temple. Why do you always have to be so philosophical and deep?" Mm-hmm. But you live long enough to see that the things that appear to be working against you were really working for you. And now, in any way, if anybody ever points out that I'm different or odd or unusual, I go, thank you for noticing. Mm-hmm. It's a much different kind of thing. But absolutely, I think, because a lot of people, they aren't really living or going down the path that their life and its uniqueness is destined to go down. People will say, oh, this motivational or this joyful stuff, my life isn't working. And usually when I hear people say that, I know what they mean is I haven't learned how to work with life, because life does work. It gets better as we age. It gets more dynamic. It gets more filled with possibilities, because as we deepen our awareness of what matters to us, we let go of all the things we focus on that don't matter to us. So we have a lot more life and time to have meaning and depth. But if we're going against the grain of how life is designed to work, absolutely, it feels like, what is my place? What is my purpose? But when we learn to go with it instead of against it, the message and the whole image of our lives becomes a lot more clearer.
I was thinking of a scene from a movie, starring George Clooney, Up in the Air. Are you familiar with that one?
Yeah.
You know, and for our listeners out there, Up in the Air, George Clooney is someone who is actually hired to go and fire people. And as he says, his job is to make the abyss more bearable. And it's interesting because there's a scene where he is actually terminating a guy, or actually he's got this young girl who's got a new way that she decides she wants to do these things, but there's a point where he's reading over the resume and the guy is very, upset about the fact that, he's losing this job and what about all of his benefits, and it goes on and on and on, all these things that, he's given up a little bit at a time to be where he's at. And he says, George Clooney to the guys, says, well, how much do they pay you the first year here for you to give up on all your dreams? And when I was reading the title of your book, When Did You Die?, you realize a lot of times those things that you really yearn for, that you really think would really fulfill you, that inherently would do, that if you don't pursue those, that's what you actually do. A part of you just does that. It dies, and it's sad when you see somebody, especially when they're young, where they look like they've just given up.
Absolutely. And that is exactly, what we're talking about, is how we die energetically. We're all part of nature, so we're supposed to be expressing as nature does. Vibrant, until the end of our time comes, we ought to be leaving with as much energy when we have a physical death as how we started. But we start having subtle deaths along the way. We stop speaking out for what matters. A lot of people just take verbatim the beliefs of their parents, the practices, the habits of their parents or their grandparents or their school teachers, and they never really spend the time necessary to look at life values, what matters, what they really want to focus on, to question that. And little by little, there starts to be these subtle deaths. The other element of it is that I think a lot of people, they really think that the idea of celebrating life is to get to a place that you don't have feelings. And that's discounting a whole half of, who we are in our humanity. The Creator, whatever we want to name that created us, Creator, God, Spirit, it doesn't matter. We know we were created by something. Because none of us have the capacity to push a button and make it happen, right? Mm-hmm. And so in that, we were created to be, these vibrant beings and in our uniqueness, ways of showing up, and we were created to have feelings. And it's the denial of so many feelings that becomes that heavy weight, that people carry, or the medication instead of meditation, and, those types of things that prevent us from being vibrant. I have more energy in my 50s than I ever had in my 30s, and I'm amazed. It increases through the years rather than decrease.
It's amazing when you reach out toward the things that you consider blissful, that are uniquely yours. It isn't what somebody else does where they say, this will make you happy. It's something that you inherently know inside of you does make you happy. And as you said, it creates this unusual but abundant energy that just keeps on perpetuating. And it's very exciting to know that something like that exists.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that, one of the things, especially when we're looking at over 50, I think that it really behooves people to take a real deep, introspective exploration into what they give their energy to. Energy is always given to us. We don't go through a line on Sunday and we're given energy rations. We don't have so many rations of energy that we can use at any given week, and then if we use them all at the beginning of the week, we're going to run out. It's not how our lives work. We, like nature, are exposed to infinite possibilities about energy. We have a vote or an involvement, if you will, in how we maintain it, through our nutrition, through getting the right amount of rest and those kind of things, absolutely. But when we look at energy by itself, that there's plenty of, more often than not, it's not that something is taking our energy. It's the feeling behind what we're doing that's taking our energy. Does that make sense? I mean, do you connect to that concept? Because, you hear people, it becomes like a mantra. Well, right now I'm having to deal with this thing, I'm having to take care of my mom, and I'm having to, and it sounds so depleting, so it's the choices that people make. It's sometimes the choices that we're in that we didn't feel like we had a choice, like taking care of a parent or taking care of a grandchild or some aging animals or, whatever it is that comes our way. But I've found that so much in my life, it's my opinion, it's my either dread or my joy or my willingness to do something just because it's mine to do right now. And all of that heavily impacts how it affects me and how much energy I have during a given day. I went through 8 months of losing yet another aging Yorkie. And the two boys were some of the greatest loves of my life. And the one brother who lost the other, spent many sleepless nights looking for the other one. And I had the little baby monitor and lots of different things and didn't get a lot of sleep for those 8 months. Wouldn't be anything I would prescribe for most people to do. But I knew that it was mine to do. And I was able to, do what I do, and if I had not pointed out to people that I had gone with so little sleep, no one would have ever known it. Again, wouldn't be anything I would recommend long term, but for me, it was what I needed to do for the longevity, the experience of my life because of the relationship I had, with these particular animals. So it's the energy behind the energy of what we're participating in that either depletes us and or energizes us.
Now, there was a point in your life where you really faced that challenge as you had decided to talk with your mom about a relationship that you were beginning. Tell us about that.
Well, when I was little, I
can't imagine you ever being little. Maybe the dogs were, but I just can't see you being little.
Oh, that's so kind. Well, when I was growing up, I probably did what so many people did back then in the 60s, but very few people were talking about it then. I was exploring my sexuality. And it just wound up for me. I mean, I certainly pursued, the first kiss from the boyfriend and the relationships, and because I've always loved men for all apparent reasons. And it just didn't work out that way. That my first relationship of any intimacy was with a young girl. I was not quite 14, and she was over 17. And having said that, when it was discovered in my family, of course, it was like a huge volcanic explosion in that I was sent to the mental health clinic. I feared for my life. My grandmother told me she was sad she wasn't going to see me in heaven. I mean, that's a lot of things to carry when you're just going into your teenage years, which by itself is kind of, crisis management. Anyway, that being said, I explored, through my life, obviously already being so different about so many other things, wanting and seeking some sense of normalcy. And yet, those were different times then, as you know, Daniel. So
right.
That being said, as I grew into, a greater sense of adulthood and not really liking labels so much, I had a wonderful relationship with a beautiful man named Jack for many years. And then as I kept evolving in my life, and I would always be open, not that I've had that many relationships, just want to make a note of that, but in the beautiful people that came into their lives to share their life with me, I was always open. And thus, I discovered a relationship of a friendship I had. So I'm 44 years old, and I went, okay, wow, oh my gosh, this is the one. She is truly the love of my life. And so for all those years, I had never out loud addressed my lifestyle with my family since we had put it all in a box and I was going to hell or I could be sent away in a mental health clinic. And though as an adult, I knew that people around me, because, a lot of people knew me, it's like I knew that wasn't true, but I still carried those sensations of when I was a child. And the sensation would just kind of take over my body. My palms would become sweaty. I'd get very anxious, go into full-blown anxiety. And I went, oh, my gosh. And so I just knew that I had to address it. And so I'm on the phone with my mom one day, and she's asking the typical investigative questions. You seem so happy. Have you met a new friend? Uh-huh. Yes, okay. Is your friend male or female? And I go, Mom, let's put these questions.
Right.
Let's put these questions to rest. I'm going to be home in 15. Do you have time to talk? I'm going to call you, blah, blah. I literally got up. I closed the bedroom door to kind of put myself in a protective spiritual container. And I told my mom, I said, do you love me? Yes. She said, of course. What a question. And I went, well, you still love me if the love of my life is woman. She said, absolutely. And that was, the rest, as we say, would be history. And then I still felt the sensation. So I announced it to my spiritual community. And then Lifetime Television called and wanted me to do something, and then I went on national television and said something very similar. So it was like one of the greatest healings of my life to be able to stand in that space and just give myself credit that this is my path and it is what is, and all is well.
Mm-hmm. When you take a look at something like your book and you realize there's a tremendous amount of spiritual development that people will find insightful from what you write. And what I like about it is that you've also approached it from a shamanic point of view. And if you could, for the listeners, kind of share why that's been a strong influence in your life in shamanism, because I think sometimes when people hear the word shamanic or shaman, they think of witch doctors and these ridiculous things that maybe they've seen, in a television movie, but there is a lot of real discipline when it comes to this particular spiritual art form, if you will.
Absolutely, and we look at, when we look at all the things that as a culture we've apologized to because we didn't know better, women not being treated equally, people of color, racism, hateism, all those things, we through lack of knowledge or education or awareness, totally discounted. The way we treat certain tribes of animals is pathetic. But, that's a different talk for a different day, and, I could talk to you 8 hours about, my passions about these things, but when you look at the core value that each of these things that I just mentioned has, it's the value of life. So that being said, we, as people, took over a lot of the tribes, even in the United States, where we had the capacity to learn great things from what they were doing and what they were practicing. What we know is that when journalists or travelers or adventuresome people years ago would go into different cultures throughout our globe, they would find that they had certain practices of how they kept energy, how they sustained themselves when they went through tragedies and things like that, different medicines and natural medicines of the earth, that they were able to use, like homeopathy, alternative kind of things. There's a wealth of wisdom. And literally speaking, shaman means holy person of a tribe or leader of a group of people. And so most people might remember it from Kevin Costner, Dances with the Wolves, that he received coaching and counseling from the holy person of that particular tribe in that time. And so when someone is sick or when they're going through tragedy or they've lost a loved one, the shaman knew, wow, we need to gather, we need to do energy work, we need to work with your light, your chakras, the natural medicines that you need, your nutritional value, to help you come back to being fully alive again. And we've lost a lot of that because as much as we love traditional new medicine that's, not quite 200 years old. We love it. I mean, I definitely will go for it and use it. But yet we listen to it as it's the one-all, do-all. Whereas in the shaman's practice, there's a lot of ancient wisdom that we can use that helps us stay grounded, stay more balanced, have more energy in our body. And so it found me, Daniel, if you will, by divine appointment, because I was in my 30s. I was going into my 40s. I had always been a fireball, just a lot of energy, and I started noticing that a part of me was dying. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know how to, share it with anybody. It wasn't a therapeutic thing because, I've been doing group therapy and always about that's a great thing to do. But I intuitively knew that wasn't the answer. So the short of the story is I went to support a woman who had lost her husband. He was 42, just dropped dead, an instant death. And I went to see her a couple of months later to see how she was doing, and she was so vibrant. And I had never seen that before because I know what a loved one or a close death at somebody's door does to people's color in their energy field. They're usually gray, and they look shocked, kind of white, whiter in color. It doesn't matter what color their skin is; they look kind of a grayish tone in their energy field. And she wasn't. And I said, "What in the world have you done?" And she said, "Well, I was introduced to a shaman that talked to me and saw different times in my life where I had tremendous energy loss, and that energy had never been really fully been replenished back into my body. And we do it unconsciously, you see. Otherwise, we wouldn't do it. If I said to you, Daniel, you have, would you on purpose, create reasons as to why you don't have energy in your body? Of course not. You have a very busy and active life. We kind of check out. It's like we see some people that have lost a loved one, for example, or just heard that they have a tragic disease. They kind of check out of their body. They become kind of naturally anesthetized because it's too much to cope with at one time, Mm-hmm. And so in that space, we have like fragmented levels of energy within our own being. And so a shaman or a practitioner that knows how to practice these things has the ability to bring this energy back in. So I just took like an hour answer and wanted to bring it into let's land that plane. Did what I say kind of, is it clear enough?
I think it's certainly clear enough for our listeners. They've heard quite a bit when it comes to this. But I think, the one thing I wanted to kind of share with the listeners is I really got a kick out of this when I came across it in the book, and it was talking about the 4 bones that you need to have in your life. And, as we were talking about shamanism here, I don't think I've ever read in a book where somebody talked about these 4 bones before. Let's go over that a little bit.
Okay, absolutely. Do you want to mention them and then me share with them what they mean?
Let's go ahead and start with the first one that'll get us up walking right, and that is the backbone. How many times have you possibly said to someone, or maybe you've heard, geez, you were awfully spineless in that particular situation?
Absolutely. And we look at, like, the wisdom and all the energy going around about Selma and Martin Luther King. He basically said that we begin to die when we become silent about what really matters to us.
Right.
And I think some people will think, well, I'm not a protester, I'm not that kind of person. But that's not always enough. There's things that could be going on in your own home, in your own job, that you don't speak out for yourself or speak up for yourself. And it just, I find it sometimes so amazing how, people complain about customer service these days. But who allowed it? We did.
Right.
We did. And, I had a small example of that the other night when I had a friend over and we ordered from the local Thai restaurant. And the last time I ordered from the restaurant, I said specifically brown rice. I said it 3 times. They brought white rice, okay? And so it happened this week, and I called them and I said, you don't have to make another trip out here, but you need to make a note of that, because I said brown rice, not white rice. Right. And I know you'd want to know, because there are many people out there that would never say anything, but that would kind of lie dormant in their mind, and they wouldn't use them in the future. They don't listen to what I have to say, that kind of thing. But we don't give people the credit they deserve to share with them in their process, or to speak out. And, unfortunately, instead of just considering it healthy, we call it like, God, you're too strong, or you're too aggressive or something, when you're just trying to give out information. So it's about courage. Your backbone is, what kind of courage do you have? Because it's important to use your courage, so it won't become you are rage in another form,
right.
or your age. But yeah, it's very crucial. So that's the one about your backbone, showing up and really sharing.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting when you think of the world of work, especially in a day and an age where being employed carries a lot of uncertainty for people. And you realize as you meet people along the way who have really sold themselves out, to a point where they don't feel they have choices anymore, and so they're at a job with an employer that you can see every day when they go to it. It's like they're driving to their grave, and you think, why don't you just let yourself get fired? Do anything you can to burn that bridge and feel the liberation that comes with it. But it really astounds people that they don't realize they can do something like that.
Right. It's so true.
The wishbone.
The wishbone. Always keep a light under your dreams. Now, I like to say my dreams are waiting on me to come true, because I think so many people, they are in God's waiting room. And that, when my dreams come true, then I'm really going to feel like I made it, or I matter, or I deserve it, or, whatever all those conversations are. So for me, my dreams are waiting on me to come true, that in the interim between A and B of what I'm perceiving I want to have happen, and the next dream that I have on the horizon, what needs to come true in me now? What can I do to improve my trade, my skill, my talent, my voice, my energy, my clothing, my whatever it is, in the meantime, so that when my dream knocks on my door, I won't deny it or reject it because I'm uncomfortable. I will be able to accept it and step right into it.
And when it comes to achieving dreams, there are times people will think, well, I've been able to get some of the things that I wanted in my life, but there are other things that I just think won't happen. And it's interesting when I do hear that from someone, I say, well, what evidence do you have that that's true? And most of the time they can't give me a good answer for that.
Isn't that the truth? Isn't that the truth? And, I like you without, I never want to be condescending to anyone or anything. But, often if it's said in a certain way, I'll say, well, I'm grateful that the person that invented the safety pin didn't buy that. I'm grateful that the person that created the light bulb didn't buy that, or the airplane, or the automobile. Can you imagine trying to explain some of these things to people? And I'm grateful I didn't buy what my 6th grade teacher told my parents. I was never going to amount to anything because I talked too much.
Jeez, you were probably a lot like me around that time, where not only did I know the principal's first name, but I also knew the extended family as well.
You know it. So, yes. So, we wouldn't have the 4-minute mile. We would have never gone to the moon. Women wouldn't vote. I mean, where's the list? I mean, the list goes on and on and on. It's about putting your whole self in first. I mean, obviously a dream's never going to happen if that's what you affirm all the time. It's never going to happen, never going to come true. For me, Daniel, and I get a good sense you're the same way, I'd rather aim high. I mean, who's going to hold you liable if you fall a little bit short of aiming high?
Right.
I mean, we do too much settling in our society today. And I mean, even people that talk about the aging process, I go, well, if we can do the 4-minute mile, why can't we double our life expectancy? They did in the 80s and 90s. They doubled their life expectancy. Many people did. So why can't we? If there were millionaires that came out of the Depression, then why can't we have some average, quote unquote, middle American families become able to travel all over the world or whatever it is that they want to do? Why don't we? But even in the aging process, you hear people go, well, I just, I'm okay about, getting to be 90. I just don't want to be drooling all over myself and having someone feed me. So they're already giving, aside from death, one of the worst case scenarios instead of let's be Betty White,
Right, or George Burns for that matter.
Or George Burns,
right.
or lots of others. Why do we give worst case scenarios of dread of we don't want that to happen to us? We have that potential to at least set a roadmap in place in order for that possibility to happen. And many people have told us that our bodies are designed to at least live to be 125.
Now, the funny bone is one that I found interesting. Tell us about that.
I don't know where I would be if I didn't have a sense of humor because I believe in laughing, and I have learned through my life to laugh at myself and lighten up and find things that make me laugh, and that energy of a deep belly laugh. And probably like you and many of our listeners, I mean, people have said to me, I love hearing you laugh. You just have such a deep belly laugh. It's so cool. And I went, well, it's because I've cried a lot of tears.
Ah.
Yeah, made a lot of room on that in that grief capacity. Because I believe in crying, it's like that emotion is just as strong as laughing. We're the ones that judge it, We're absolutely the ones that judge it. I mean, look at a new baby, cries and cries and cries, and 3 seconds later it's laughing and laughing and laughing and laughing. That's who we are. And so I have really been into that practice. Years ago, I traveled internationally, and I came across a statement that said that, children laugh 100 plus times a day, and as adults, we laugh less than 10 to 15 times a day. And I went, wow, that's sad, And Norman Cousins, many others have proven to us that more laughter, less dis-ease, less disease. And so laughing is good medicine all the way around.
The other thing that's important, too, is to consider laughter when it is in a position that, we grow up in school, and you were mentioning, or how school seemed to be for you was probably a lot like me. You're making mistakes, you're talking too much, you're getting disciplined constantly. And, as much as we laud and parade education as being so valuable, I think the institution itself, especially in K through 12, needs to have a real shakedown, because I think it has caused a lot of damage, to potential spirits, that is, when, a teacher has the audacity to say something like they said about you, that there's, really little hope for you, that you won't amount to anything. And I can't tell you how often, and I'm sure you've encountered this as you've been out on tours, of people saying that they experience the very same thing, and that something like that really rides someone. One of the worst things I think also is when you have that parent-teacher conference. Well, your son or your daughter is just so intelligent, so gifted, but they're really not working up to their potential. And I remember one time that happened. My mother just sternly looked at the teacher and said, "Do you feel that you're living up to your potential?" And I don't remember that I heard anything like that ever again in school. But I found that funny, like, how often do we really try to live it to our potential, and do we have the capacity to laugh when we fall short of where we believe we want to be?
Oh, that is it is so profound, and sometime I would love the two of us just to do a program around that. It's very powerful, and I'm certainly not just being presumptuous that you would want me on your show, but I would welcome you on mine if you email me, templehayes.com. I'll send it over to my executive producer. I love this conversation because that's where it really starts, and that's where it begins. And I'm such a spokesperson for this kind of thing. I remember years ago I was putting together a creative summer program for kids because of the lack of creative programs in the school systems, and the recess, no more outdoors, and the arts, and all because of funding. I say get rid of some of the classes that you'll never use in your entire freaking life.
Right.
Which the others you'll use all your life. But anyway, having said that, we, in doing this program, I was interviewing a jazz teacher, and he had this, 4-page resume, and I read it, but I looked at him and I said, here's the number one question that I have to ask you. And he said, what is that? And I said, why do you want to work with children? And he looked all baffled by it. Like somebody had, like it bit his tongue. And I said, why do you want to be with children? He said, I want you to know, in 23 years, no one has ever asked me that question. And I said, well, see, to me, that's the most important question. And I don't think we ask that question enough. Mm-hmm. I think that we have a lot of educators that like the package. I think we have a lot of educators that love having the summers off and, those kind of things. And I think we all like benefits in the working world, but I do think in the early stages of development, we really need to be clear. Why are those people in front of our children? Why? Right. And what are their interests? And what do they really care about? And it's just like, you probably know, I am a spiritual leader of a somewhat sizable community of all age groups. But the only way that is possible is not just because of me alone, but because of the diversity, the inclusivity, and the youth being strong drivers of our community. You look at churches throughout our country today. Many of them are closing. Why? Because you have the leadership saying, I'm unwilling to do this and that. I want to do it the way I've always done it. We can't change it. No, we can't have screens in front of the room. No, we can't talk about social media. And they have aging people, and they don't replace them. So the same thing is true with educators. They're still trying to educate like when you and I are in school. I mean, the focus and attentive capacity now is so much less than even, when we were in school. So it must change. It really must change. So obviously you can tell you've struck a chord with me.
Well, no, the thing is you're talking about something that I think is so valuable that we continue to move forward this day and age with the same kind of thinking that we had 50 and 60 years ago that no longer serves this day and age at all. We take a look, for instance, and this is speaking just specifically about the educational system. They're saying 1 out of 2 teens is likely to drop out of school. And I say, and that surprises people, really? Because I felt that way, too, while I was in school. I couldn't understand why I was taking particular classes and spending time sitting in front of somebody that didn't want to do anything more than try to be flirtatious with the girls. And I'm thinking, this is an adult teacher, and we're doing nothing in this class, And the fact that you also may go to a church that has a very strong influence in the community that you live in, and something is just off with the guy that's preaching from the pulpit on a Sunday, but yet living life in a very different way Monday through Saturday.
That's right.
And then you look at these, and it can go even to your parents. Your parents raised you really by the same way they were raised themselves. There really wasn't much of a change, it seems. So you can imagine that you have this tremendous imprinting, and you give a great story in here about the eagle that is raised as a chicken. And that is in all of us that we realize if we can just somehow capture that freedom to break free of the imprinting, to begin to question, why have I made the choices in my life that I have made that I know that somehow inside of me just don't serve? How do I break free of that? And that is definitely very well answered in your book, When Did You Die? Because that's the point. When did you finally surrender and say, I'm just going to continue to do this? And I know a friend of mine who actually is a health practitioner. You could just see this woman in her early 60s, a beautiful woman, but you could see that she's just energetically beat down. One time, we started filming her to do a particular series that would help her out, and I noticed that she had this real nervous slur in her voice, So I got her on the phone and I said, I'm going to start talking to you about a couple of things, but these are some of my guesses, right? And she says, wow, nobody's ever hit me that hard before. And I said, if you really want this to be successful, you're going to have to find a way to step out of that shadow and be who you authentically are. The rewards will surprise you tremendously. Would you agree with something like that?
Oh, totally. Absolutely. And I think it's important for people to understand, sometimes people get so overwhelmed. I've been being influenced by so many people all my life, and that's kind of I really love to work with Daniel, metaphors and analogies, because that's how I learn. Sacred storytelling, we can kind of get it. We can have that kind of aha moment. And I kind of liken it to how so many people live today. It's kind of like a computer that has so many windows open in Explorer or Safari, and all those windows are running, and they're running, and they're running, and then you go to look at a beautiful something on YouTube, and the buffering, it won't come through clearly because you have so much running on the computer. That's how a lot of people are going through life. They have so many influencers. They're trying to please too many people. They're listening to what somebody told them that's absolutely not true. They're, looking at the weather to see whether or not they're going to have a good day. They're weather people. They are news people, that they take this one imprint of just, 14 to 20 stories of the worst, most tragic things in all of the world, with 7.3 billion people, of a lot of things happening, a lot of great things happening, a lot of people recovering from cancer and illnesses and, doing all kind of things. And yet we get the worst case scenarios in the news. Right. And so we go, okay, that's going to influence how I'm going to feel, and I'm so concerned about the world. Well, get real. You're not seeing the world, folks. You're not seeing the world. You're seeing the stories that over and over again, as fear-based as they can be, people keep looking so that we'll be able to offer the advertisers lots of packages. And it just goes on and on and on. But we are so vulnerable to really take a time out, like we did as kids, and go, I got to get off this gerbil wheel. Right. I want different results. I need to start today making new choices.
The other thing, too, especially for people out there who are thinking, there are goals, there are dreams that I have, and they don't feel they're attainable. Now, some of them may be a little difficult. They might not come to you right away. But the fact is, there was a little encouraging line that when you actually say this to yourself at a point that you feel overwhelmed, if somebody else could do that, then so can I. And the fact is, we're all born with more or less the same tools, the capacity to think, to breathe in and out, to eat, and to know what makes us happy. That's not such an unusual toolbox that, somebody out there just has it better than you do. We all more or less equally have. And you take a look at, for instance, someone like Stephen Hawking, and if anybody wants to throw disability at me, well, here's an example of somebody that's gotten about as disabled as you can get, and he's still solving, or at least attempting to, solve the mysteries of the universe. Mm-hmm. And if he could do it, why can't you? What stops you? I bet you put that question to your audiences quite a bit.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
And what happens when you do that, when you really put somebody's feet to the fire?
And to me, it's like that's where all the answers lie, are in the questions that we learn how to ask. And if you look at the word question and you break it down, it's quest I on.
Oh, boy. I could just feel the listeners now. I didn't think about it that way before.
And, when you get back to that, I heard a speaker say many years ago, when children start going into the school system, they start out with one big question mark. Well, why do we do that? Well, why do I need algebra? Why do I need chemistry? Why did I need to learn how to, dissect that frog? I still don't know why. I did not enjoy it. I cried. I never have used that skill, Daniel.
Right.
Anyway, when children go to school, they start out with a big question mark. When they come out, they're a period. This is what they told me, and this is what I have to do, period. This is probably the only school I'll ever be able to apply for college, period. Mm-hmm. Well, I'm never going to get enough money to get my dream to come true because my teacher told me she didn't know anybody that ever had, period. Mm-hmm. There you go. It must stop. It must stop. And it's your listeners that can be the modeling for people to stop it.
Mm-hmm. Well, the other thing, too, is when somebody says that you can't, when you are ready to embark on something, and, you can just simply say, what evidence do you have that that's true? And I remember going back even into the Bible and the teachings of Jesus Christ, and he simply was saying, look, if you've got something that you want to do, don't tell anybody about it. Just go out and do it. And I think sometimes we get excited when we want to share those desires because they're just going to energize us as we pursue them. You share those with people who allegedly, to you are people that you respect, that you revere, and they might dampen that spirit and say, well, I don't know if you really want to do that, and they're meaning well to save you from pain that they feel you're inevitably going to experience. And you simply just have to say to yourself, why don't I just get started and build the momentum? What can they do then?
Yeah.
Fascinating stuff. Is there a website people can find out more about you and your book?
Absolutely. It's TempleHayes.com. 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 It will take them to the link to Amazon or Barnes & Noble for the book. I'd very much urge people, if they've enjoyed what we've talked about, there's so much more in depth in the book. I have a cruise coming up. There's all different kind of stuff that they can find, and I'll send a free gift, a free introductory copy of the first part of my book.
And I wanted to let the listeners know, too, that you've also dedicated yourself to what is known as the SOFI Project, S-O-F-I. Tell us about that.
The Sophie Project, I've been a person, I think because of, I felt like I was rescued in my own life along the way. I love rescuing animals. And I can have just a full plate with figuring out how one more thing can go in that calendar, and I can drop it all just to help place a dog or a cat. We actually have our own rescue adoption through my own spiritual community, but the Sophie Project really launched when I went to Brazil. And I saw some of the dogs there, and like so many places, even in our own country, the experiences were pretty rough. And so I made a commitment to 8 dogs and brought them back into the state, one of them, of course, being named Sophie. And so we educate, teach, and donate to organizations that really support ways for us to move beyond just this constant euthanization of animals that we have in our world today, but to look at better and greater alternatives.
And that's been the key to this whole conversation we've had today, is always look for better alternatives to the way that you're doing things. If you just don't feel that you're as happy as you would like to be, that your desires aren't being fulfilled as regularly as you would like to experience them, and ask that question, when did you die? And if you can't get an answer, then certainly pick up the 8 steps to stop dying every day and start waking up. And that's what Temple Hayes is telling you today. Right, Temple?
You got it. Daniel, you are a delight. What a great host you are.
Well, thank you.
It's been just a great pleasure for me to be with you today.
We'll have to connect again, just like you suggested earlier, whether it's on this show, which I'd be glad to bring you back, or being on your show. I'd be more than happy to do that.
Absolutely. Please email me, and let's get that set up, okay?
All right. And TempleHayes.com is the website?
TempleHayes.com, Hayes. Thank you so much.
Thank you for being on the program today.
My pleasure.
We want to thank you, the listeners out there, for tuning in. You can also follow us on Twitter at Beyond 50 Radio. You can find us there as well as Beyond50Radio.com, which is our website. I'm Daniel Davis. Thank you for tuning in. This is the Beyond 50 Radio program. And remember, live your day past halfway.